Welcome, everybody, to the first of a series of debates that we're going to be doing for PoliticsNY as we discuss the issues, meet the candidates, and really get into further detail about how the candidates feel about this year's election. And also, maybe you'll learn some new information about just exactly where and who you should vote for. Now, interesting election year in the state of New York because a primary is on August 23rd, which, well, I don't know the last time there's been a primary in August. It's, of course, unusual because it's a result of all of that redistricting that's been going on. There was the other primary in June, but this one consists of really candidates for the state center in New York and candidates who are running for congressional office. I am joined by Steve Witt, who is the political editor for PoliticsNY. Steve, good to see you today.
Good evening, Jane.
How are you?
Good, thank you very much. And
you're the timekeeper is what you are. That's your official role, in addition to, of course, asking the tough questions.
Right.
You will be doing that throughout the course of these debates. It's exactly a bit of a misnomer to call this a debate this evening because our guest is Suraj Patel. I hope we can edit this. Sorry. It's a little bit of a misnomer to be calling this a debate this evening because we're talking with Suraj Patel, who is running for the 12th Congressional District that is currently held by longtime Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. And she is also being opposed by Jerry Nadler, and both of them have declined to join us for this debate. We will interview them separately. Of course, Nadler is also the longtime incumbent, but he was running he operated in the 10th district of Manhattan. And again, due to this redistricting, he is now running in the 12th district, all of which can be a little bit confusing at times. But the bottom line here is neither Nadler or Maloney are with us tonight, but Mr. Patel is. I know you were hoping to debate a couple of empty squares, but you're debating with us right now. How are you doing tonight? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And let's just, factually, let's come to why we're in this race in the first place. It wasn't just crazy redistricting. The fact of the matter is that every 10 years, districts have to be redrawn based on the census. Now, I'm a professor at NYU. I'm an attorney. I've taught about gerrymandering and continuing legal education, voter suppression for almost a decade now. And call me old-fashioned, but voters should choose their politicians and not the other way around. Now, when this round of redistricting was happening, remember, the voters of New York, in a state constitution, approved a 2014 amendment saying that partisan gerrymandering and incumbency protection gerrymandering were unconstitutional. Last November, Carolyn Maloney was reported by the New York Times as angling to shed thousands of Latino and young voters out of her district, utilizing race and age to cut out voters. Why? Because 2 years ago, I nearly defeated her, lost by just 2,700 votes, in a race that was marred by vote-by-mail failures in the middle of COVID. And what she did was angle to shed out all those precincts that she lost. Jerry Nadler made a deal with her and gave her half the Upper West Side. Now, when the Supreme Court of New York looked at all of these districts, including that New York 10 that snaked all the way around, the one that became national news as being egregious, they got caught. So this is a comeuppance in some ways. Incumbency protection gerrymandering is invidious. It's bad for our democracy. Maloney and Nadler were more concerned about holding on to power than they were about fighting Republicans, frankly. And they got caught. And so we're in a three-way generational battle for the future of the city, for the party, for the country. I'm the only pro-democracy candidate in this race because I haven't gerrymandered. I won't gerrymander. I don't take corporate PAC money. They do, to the tune of millions of dollars from manufacturers, investors in manufacturers of guns, from health insurance and drug companies. And there's a massive difference between the three of us in this race. I would have enjoyed.
I want to take note with some of that. You say that there's a tremendous difference between the three of you, but there are a lot of people who argue that you're very similar on what you stand for. The difference between them and you is that you're just, as you pointed out, generations younger. So what do you say to those people that you really are just a younger version of them?
I will take that answer in three steps. One, tremendous differences between me and Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler. First off, Carolyn Maloney was a leading anti-vaccine advocate in Congress for 15 years. She authored 9 anti-vax bills, one of which was co-sponsored by Ron Paul. She spoke at an anti-vax rally in 2005. Once again, in 2009 with Jenny McCarthy, she held a hearing on vaccines and autism and compared vaccinations to the tobacco industry. You can draw a straight line from that industry, from that hearing to the anti-vax movement today, and the reason a third of Americans won't get the vaccine because of perceived safety issues. In the meanwhile, at the height of the pandemic, when this history came out, Jerry Nadler endorsed her anyway. Backroom deals and buddy-buddy politics. My record against Carolyn Maloney is significantly different. She voted for the 94 crime bill that created a mass incarceration problem. She voted to create ICE. Jerry Nadler voted for fast-track deportations. Both take corporate PAC money. The differences are stark. But at the same time, you're right about one thing. Currently, in the current iteration of Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler and where they've evolved to, our positions on things like climate change and Medicare for all are the same. However, the question is then, which of these Democrats is best positioned in 2022 to take on this version of Republicans with the energy, the zeal, the aggression, and the tactics necessary in a modern campaign and modern social and digital media scenario? And that would be me.
But you're also talking about two people who would, if either one of those two wins, both of them have a lot of clout in the House of Representatives, which, by the way, if indeed some of the things that we're hearing about from the rest of the country where Republicans might be poised to take a lot of those seats away, clout is important. Being in positions of power where they are, where they might be able to be more.
Well, let's talk about their clout. 1990s Democrats today have lost every major battle to Mitch McConnell and Republicans, from abortion to gun rights to climate change. We are 50 years backwards over their tenure. The clout they had, they used for things, like I said, anti-vax hearings. The clout they had, they didn't use to secure our rights, to codify Roe, to codify Griswold. What the hell is the point of that clout then? And I will agree with you. There's a very high likelihood that we lose the House next year. And there's going to be a major discussion in the Democratic Party as to what direction we go. And that discussion is going to require people who have a stake in the future. I'm not running for a victory lap. I'm not running for my ego or to name my own successor. Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler will not be germane to that conversation about where the Democrats go next year or for the next 10 years on how to win back these rights. If it takes a quarter of the time to win back the rights that we lost for the last 50 years, then I'm the only one in the race with the stamina, the energy, the time, and the ideas to do it. You know, they don't even have plans on their websites for public safety, for climate, for incarceration, for the economy, for inflation. You know why they don't? All they have is an accomplishments page. Elections are about the future. They don't even have a plan for the future. That's why I'm in this race.
You know, just speaking to the future, a lot of people feel, first of all, would you caucus with the squad?
No, I am not a squad person. I never have been. I'm a proud Obama Democrat. I worked for President Obama in 2007, 2008, when we were the quote-unquote progressives because we opposed the Iraq War. The definition of that word has changed. I consider myself a practical, pragmatic Democrat. I'm the only one in this race who has signed both sides of the paycheck, who has fought foreclosures, who has worked in the private sector and created jobs and who understands what New Yorkers are going through. In many ways, that makes me the practical Democrat here. But no, I would not squad with the squad.
So speaking of practical Democrat, the House has been pushing a big bill that Senator Manchin has opposed, saying let's take a pause because of inflation. There's been some argument that some of the inflation was caused because of overstimulus money, flooding America, with money. And I'm wondering, as a progressive Democrat, how do you feel the economy could get under control? Do you think that what a Kenyan form of the economy is working?
The Keynesian form, you mean, right?
Correct.
Well, yeah. First off, yes, of course it's working. There's ample evidence to suggest that the stimulus after President Biden took office contributed in a small way to this inflationary spike. The main reasons we're facing an inflationary spike are because of COVID disruptions of supply chains, a war in Ukraine that has driven up commodity prices, global warming, frankly, that has driven up food prices with record droughts across the world, which means this year's harvest was one of the lowest in a decade. All of these things are conspiring to do, creating a massive inflationary spiral. But it isn't just the stimulus. Now, Joe Manchin is wrong, because what that bill and the bill that should be put before the Senate and the House should do is to plan for a long-term transition to a green energy economy by bringing the cost of renewable energy down to where fossil fuels become economically unviable in 10 years. We cannot find ourselves subject to supply shocks from oil and coal for the rest of our lives. It happened in 1970, it happened in 89, it happened in 99, it happened in 2001, it happened in 2007. How many times, by the way, number of times in that scenario that Carol Maloney and Jerry Nadler were in office and did nothing? How many times do we have to learn the same lessons before we realize we need to transition on to energy independence? And that's what that Build Back Better bill, the skinny down version, does. From the clean energy side, it moves us to a future that we inoculate ourselves from these kinds of shocks. Now, there are comprehensive ways to tackle inflation, and Congress has not acted.
What are they?
Within the first 100 days, President Biden asked for a bill. It's called the Competes Act. It creates a massive $300 billion investment in semiconductors to counter a rising China, for rare earth minerals, for battery technology, and things like that. It passed the U.S. Senate. It has passed the U.S. Senate, and it has been held up by these two committee chairs. The president has been asking for it on his desk. 2.6% less inflation projected if these investments are made in the manufacturing capacity of America. Why? You might want to ask them. They didn't join your debate, but we should ask them why. We should suspend all non-China related tariffs, all non-Russia related tariffs. That's another 1.6% that we can take off the CPI on a month-to-month basis right now, simply by doing that. The economic war against China has not worked. These are failed Trump tariffs. Why they're still in place is beyond me. There are arcane rules on our books, like the Jones Act, the Dredge Act, which currently stop foreign vessels from unloading cargo at American ports without an American vessel and an American worker. And that means that we've got sheet metal, plywood, drywall sitting on barges outside of this port at Port Elizabeth, Newark, New Jersey, that have to wait to unload these things that would bring down the costs of these scarce materials right now. You have to have activist representation that has worked in the economy, understands the economy, is taught about the economy in order to make a new economic argument. Carol Maloney and Jerry Nadler have not participated in the modern economy ever, because they took office in the 1982, long before any of this happened. So once again, the question in this election is not about seniority or experience. It is about the right experience for now. Who walks our streets, who breathes our air, who drinks our water, and who understands the challenges New York faces and understands that this is a decade to a 2-decade project to win those things back.
Well, when you start talking about the abundant society, which is your plan for federal investments, I'm obviously that's a lot about what you just been speaking. But let's talk a little bit about education. We all know that education in this country is a major.
I keep turning my screen for the sun, and it's not really working.
Well, at least you have a lot of sunshine shining into your apartment or your home. That's good to know. But what I'm asking you is, I'd like to talk about a little bit about making our children safe for them to go to school, about gun safety, all of those sorts of issues that are top of mind of anybody who's watching this and people who are going to be going to the polls on August 23rd.
And just to piggyback on that, there's also the argument about school choice. There's the argument that the teachers union is kind of controlling the engine of schools, and in poor neighborhoods, charter schools and choice for other schools is becoming quite an issue.
So first off, I'm a proud supporter of the public education system. I'm a product of it myself, and I believe that charter schools are a tool in the toolkit to improve the public education. I don't think they should be outlawed, but I also think that charter schools ensure that they're operating for their original purpose, which is to experiment and have scalable solutions to improve the overall public school system. I firmly believe that. The scourge of guns in this country is an epidemic that we have lost a battle on again. You know, the 1994 assault weapons ban passed with less than 60 votes because it wasn't filibustered. Because back then they didn't filibuster. And what we've got right now are 1990s Democrats operating under that type of rule while Mitch McConnell and these Republicans have just thrown the whole chessboard off. They're operating under a different set of rules. So when we don't get action on guns, and by the way, when two of your opponents, Democrats, progressives in one of the most progressive cities in America, without very much electoral competition, still take corporate PAC money from companies like BlackRock, which is the largest investor in the four largest gun manufacturers in America, to the tune of $100,000 in their careers, it begs the question about hypocrisy and credibility on this issue and so many others.
You said $100,000 over the course of their careers over a 30-year span. How long ago were those, or does it continue today?
It continues today, and it's actually a lot higher than $100,000. I mean, we only went back to like 2016 or 2018 to look at that. It's available on Open Secrets or anywhere else. Single largest contributor to Carolyn Maloney. I know that it's a lower contributor to Jerry Nadler, but certainly Carolyn Maloney.
One difference between Jerry Nadler and Carolyn Maloney, I wonder how you would vote, was Jerry Nadler supported the Iran Pact under the Obama administration, and Carolyn Maloney went against it. Where would you go on that?
I think that was an incredibly courageous vote by Jerry Nadler, whose constituency was vehemently opposed to it. I'm on the side of diplomacy. At the time, the Israelis were asking for that deal. At the time, it was a signature achievement of diplomacy by your party's president. And I think Carolyn Maloney voted wrong. I think that she listened to a loud minority of donors that surround her and not what most people want, which is peace in the Middle East and a nuclear-free Iran. Now that deal is being renegotiated, and it needs to be durable, it needs to be strong, and I would support a strong, durable deal that all of the allies get together and agree with. But that's still, I guess, up in the air. But I would have supported that deal along with Jerry Nadler.
There is, may I, Jane? One other thing.
Of course.
There is an argument that you're playing kind of the spoiler for Carolyn Maloney that would help Nadler, that you could take some of her votes. Are you? Yeah, you just said you would agree with Jerry Nadler on that vote. Yeah,
that argument, whoever makes that argument is baseless and has no facts or data behind them. I have facts. I have polling. I'm not a crazy person. I'm running this race because I plan to win it. You don't raise $1.5 million to defeat two incumbents in a one-shot scenario if you don't know a path to victory. My path to victory is very simple. Nobody, that 57% of this district is looking for someone fresh, new, with energy and ideas and urgency. 43% of this district prefers somebody with seniority and experience. Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler are fishing from that same pond, 43% of people. And that number has only increased. Just take a look at the zeitgeist around. Yesterday, I was the lead story in a national AP story about generational change in politics because people are desperate for it. We've got a country that is ruled by or governed by people who are out of touch now with the modern city and country. This city is different from 1992. The people who live in it are different. The diversity and dynamism of it is different. Our cities change, but our politicians have not. And that's why I know we're going to win this race, because we have actually the largest slice of the electorate to play with here, that well over 75% of voters under the age of 50 will be voting for not Nadler or Maloney. I mean, that's just a fact.
So can we talk?
If there's a spoiler in this race, it's one of them, because I would easily take one-on-one.
Well, why do you believe that Jerry Nadler is running in the 10th district, or running in the 12th district, not the 10th? Then
it's his home. I don't begrudge Jerry for running in his home. He lived. Let's ignore the fact that the numbers were the same. 10 has nothing to do with where Jerry lives, grew up, spent 40 years of his life. And if someone told me, oh, let's make a deal, go run in downtown and into Brooklyn and to Sheepshead Bay, despite the fact that you're a historic Upper West Sider, I'd tell him to, well, I can't say it on this forum, but you know what I mean. Jerry merely switched numbers. He didn't switch addresses.
So it sounds to me, though, that you spend so much of your time going after the two of them that, I mean, we've heard some of what you can vow and promise to the voters, but I'd like to know, putting your opponents aside, just to give me in a short soundbite, so to speak, what the voters can count on you for.
Wait a minute. I would disagree. First off, we just sent a mailer out. I've written 17 op-eds this cycle alone. I penned them all myself. We were the first campaign in the country. When my sister-in-law, I have two toddler nephews. I have two nephews that are 14 months old. They were born 12 days apart. And I was with my sister-in-law. It took us 5 stores till we got to a Costco to find baby formula. Not a soul in this country was talking about it in the political sphere. I wrote an op-ed that night about how the president should invoke the Defense Production Act to produce more baby formula in this country. That 98% of baby formula is produced by 3 companies in this country. We have a 20% tariff on foreign baby formula. You know where most of the foreign baby formula comes from? The Netherlands. The Netherlands. What are we afraid of? A bunch of tall, happy babies? If we get too much Dutch baby formula here? Give me a break. And so I wrote this op-ed, and I was the first candidate to call on it. And the New York Times, who famously never publishes candidate op-eds, accepted mine because they saw me leading on the issue. They saw my press releases. They saw me talk about it for weeks before it became a national issue. I got the first candidate op-ed ever published in the New York Times in the last few years, and that was earlier in March. 2 days later, President invoked the DPA to produce baby formula. And in June, 60% more baby formula was produced by the 3 companies in New York, in America, to produce that baby formula, because they got cheaper availability and faster availability of raw materials. That's what activist leadership looks like. It looks at finding problems, practical, pragmatic problems that the government can solve before we go out there and pitch pie-in-the-sky ideas. We need to win the trust of the American people back by delivering for them on the basic necessities. It'd be crazy to tell people, I'm going to deliver to you, Medicare for kids and Medicare for all, but I can't even deliver you baby formula. And yet that's my goal. I do want to have health care for all, but we've got to take the layups, the base hits, and that's what I'm doing. That's just one example of what practical, pragmatic leadership looks like. We put out more policy, from abundant society to a massive moonshot-style innovation in mental health science and research and the Brain Initiative to tackle bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. I don't know if any of you have lost a parent or a grandparent to Alzheimer's or dementia, which shouldn't happen today. And we have the technology to do this. We don't have the political will.
To do what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
We have the technology to map the human brain, just like the Human Genome Project. This year, Congress slashed the Brain Initiative's budget to $620 million. Think about Operation Warp Speed and what it does when you can put in a massive chunk of investment to the NIH and then get the brain mapped the way the genome was mapped, and see what's happening in the world with gene therapies. The same thing can happen with brain therapies. We have put out policy after policy on dynamism and on making this American economy more competitive and to build the middle class. I'm incredibly proud of that. So we're running with ideas. I'm not running on my accomplishments. I sued Andrew Cuomo 2 years ago successfully in federal court, an injunction no one thought was going to happen, to get 1,200 more absentee ballots counted in my race because of failures of the post office to postmark ballots. And our fight for vote by mail changed vote by mail laws in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia to accept ballots on the days after the election that were postmarked before the election. I think all of us can remember watching TV nervously on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday after the Tuesday election as President Biden made up those votes as those ballots came in. I'm a fighter on the streets. I'm going to be one in Congress. That's how you can define me.
And if I can just ask you one quick question to quote the New York Times about your family's business, a multi-million-dollar development and hotel management operation that made the family rich, spawned labor complaints, and helped him finance a pricey East Village apartment and until recently a house in the Hamptons. So I know your family came from India with very little money, but built this huge organization. We built this whole huge family business. So most people don't live that way. Most people don't have lives like that.
Are we attacking the American dream in the New York Times?
We're not attacking the American dream.
Wait, let's talk about this. No, Jane. When a candidate of color whose family moved here with absolutely literally nothing, we ran a bodega. I slept in a 1-bedroom apartment with 13 family members, my grandfather, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, all in a line. We woke up at 5 a.m. to sort the New York Times. in order to make an extra dime to sell it at the because we didn't buy it pre-sorted, to make an extra dime at the bodega. I swept parking lot floors. We stayed in them. I didn't sleep in my own bedroom till 9th grade, till I was 14 years old. So if the New York Times wants to talk about someone and a family making it, rather than saying, what are the policies we need to have more families make it, then I welcome that debate. And if we want to talk about this debate, let's compare the price of my home, which my brother and I saved up money to buy and flip as an investment idea in the Hamptons, to that of Carolyn Maloney's or Jerry Nadler's. Let's compare who got their wealth, how they got it. Maloney's spending $900,000 of her own dollars of her house retirement fund to fund this campaign to buy this election. I am more than willing to have that debate.
You didn't get any money from your family at all? Did your dad donate to your campaign?
Like every other candidate on earth.
I'm just wondering.
If your family, Stephen, cannot contribute to your campaign, you shouldn't be running for office because they don't even trust you enough to do the job. Listen, the maximum a person can donate to a campaign, and everyone knows it, is $2,900. My dad contributed $2,900 to my campaign. So did my mother. I'd hope that anyone who's running for office whose parents have those means would have their parents be able to contribute that maximum.
What about anybody in the hotel industry that were involved in it?
Anybody involved with my businesses? No. Anyone who's involved with me personally, since I grew up with large numbers of people, just like anybody else? I mean, come on, Stephen. Did people from Stanford University contribute to me? Yes. Did people from NYU Law School contribute to me? Yes. Did people from the Obama campaigns that I worked on in the White House contribute to me? Absolutely. Did people from the University of Cambridge, where I got my master's in public policy, contribute to me? Yes. Did people from the law firm I worked at contribute to me? Yes. I don't understand how there's something malicious about this idea that I'm raising money from regular human beings who want representation, and nobody seems to think it's an open question as to why two of the richest members of Congress from the richest districts in America are so lazy as to not take corporate PAC money. Michael Bennet is running in Colorado, in a purple state, in one of the hardest election cycles of his life as a senator, against a self-funded millionaire Republican candidate, and he doesn't take a dime of corporate PAC money. So I'm happy to
go on.
So I'm saying I'm happy to have this debate about who gets money from where. Look, when a corporation gives money to a campaign, they only have one motive, and that is return on investment. When a human gives money to a campaign, they're either looking for representation, looking for inspiration. There hasn't been a single South Asian person elected to office in New York at the federal level, or New Jersey, or Connecticut, or Maine, or Georgia, or Florida, or any state east of the Mississippi River. There's an incredible amount of support for my campaign and candidacy from people who look like me, who want representation. And a large number of those people work in the hospitality industry. They work in law firms. They work in consulting firms. They work in finance.
Nikki Haley? I mean, she's east of the Mississippi.
I'm sorry?
Does this include Nikki Haley that you're talking about?
Nikki Haley has not contributed to my campaign, shockingly. And I'm not certain that I'd want Nikki Haley's money, nor do our politics really match up. Nor is it really the model Indian American politician that we're looking for. Let's get like a Democratic version of that in office, because we don't have any. It's sad that the most prominent Indian Americans in office were Bobby Jindal and Nikki Haley, which tells you something about, whether the Democratic Party right now, as I've, run against the establishment in New York twice, is walking the walk.
So if I might, we're getting close to our time limit here, but a question has come in from some of the people watching. One of them is, can you describe your track record as a leader or any track record in political leadership?
I believe, anonymous attendee, that I have covered that in several ways. I worked for President Obama by knocking doors. I had no political connections or money at the time. My parents never did anything in politics, never even donated to a campaign. So much to their dismay, when I left law school, I was just knocking doors in Colorado at the ground level. I ended up working through my way up and doing advanced work and traveling ahead of him, all the way to the point where we were doing trips for the White House to India, to Germany, to Saudi Arabia. I got to see firsthand what that's like. In 2016, after the Trump election, I got right back up. A bunch of us junior staffers formed an organization called The Arena that helped take back the House of Representatives, that helped lift two of my favorite members of Congress, Lauren Underwood and Andy Kim, into candidacies by wrapping them with support and launching their candidacies. I flew to Chicago to help her launch her candidacy, and she's one of our most effective congresspeople. Not only that, we've trained thousands of campaign staffers across the country that have been instrumental in the Stacey Abrams, in the Warnock win, in the Ossoff win, and a lot of generational change wins out there. So I'm incredibly proud of my organizing record. And then on top of that, from the law standpoint, come on, I sued Governor Cuomo to get thousands of ballots counted in a federal injunction that I took upon myself to do. I nearly won this race 2 years ago. Political leadership doesn't necessarily have to mean holding office. It means working around politics to get people elected and to fight for our rights. You know, when the Muslim ban came down, the Trump Muslim ban came down, I left New York City in an Uber and went straight to JFK, volunteered myself as an attorney, was there for 36 straight hours. I fought the Muslim ban on the streets. A lot of Congress people were there, by the way. I gotta tell you, I saw Joe Crowley there when I was there. I saw Nydia Velazquez when I was there. Conspicuously absent was Carolyn Maloney. She didn't show up, not the entire time. Jerry Nadler was there. In all fairness,
I want to give you a chance to make one final pitch. We'll give you a minute to do that before we wrap things up here today. So again, to the voters, what can you promise them about what you will bring to them if you're elected?
I think I hope that the voters have watched this and see that I'm bringing a level of energy and zeal and policy prowess to this race that it deserves. This is not about the past. This is not about anyone's record. I'm happy to debate mine versus theirs, both in politics and in civic life. But this is about the future. New York City faces a 7.5% unemployment rate. It faces rising crime. It faces record storefront vacancy. We've built less housing in this city in the last decade than we did in the decade of the Great Depression. We need new leadership. Everything about this city is inspiring except for its politics. What I'm offering here is change. Writ large, energetic, urgent representation. Representation that understands the stakes of the moment and the fact that we need to fight for decades against Republicans using their tactics, to fight misinformation and cyber warfare, and to fight for liberal democracy as we know it. I'm in this race for that reason and that reason alone. It happened to be against two incumbents because the map shook out. And I plan to win this race.
Well, thank you very much, Suraj Patel, for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. We will be hosting another debate, this time with actual other candidates appearing at 7 o'clock tonight.
I enjoyed that version of a debate.
I have to say, Suraj, I do want to commend you and being totally nonpartisan in this debate. It would have been nice to see Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler as well.
It certainly would have been. We would have appreciated the opportunity, and I think it would have brought much more clarity to the people who are watching. But we appreciate you and appreciate your efforts, and thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching as well. We will see you next time. Be here in a couple of hours. We'll have another debate for you.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.